What is the charge? Commissioners are not going to the Article 5 convention with their own agenda. 34 Ready legislation will forbid it with the two legislative models covering instructions and penalties. Commissioners will represent Colorado as they should and abide specifically to the Convention of States resolution, addressing term limits, federal overreach, federal fiscal responsibility, and nothing else.
Okay, let's talk next about the real meat of the 34 Ready legislation, and that is exactly how are the commissioners or delegates instructed. It's called their charge. And this is a common thing that legislators do when they're appointing commissioners to anything. Mm-hmm. They have a very specific charge. We want you to go do A, B, and C. Not D and F, A, B, and C. That's all that's within your charge. You can't go outside of it. What I really like about this part of it, it answers clearly and comprehensively the opposition groups who claim that we have no process and that there is too much uncertainty and too much risk of a runaway convention.
Absolutely.
If you look at the content of this part of the legislation, it is very specific. It's term limits, right? It's fiscal responsibility, and it's restricting the power and scope of the federal government. Okay?
Absolutely. So when you're writing this legislation, 34 Ready, you can be very specific within that instruction in that law that you cannot touch any component of the Constitution whatsoever. But you can be very direct. The legislature can be very direct with their commissioners through the commission, telling them that they cannot do anything except what is in the application, those three subject matter, period, or they're subject to recall. The legislature holds all the keys here.
Right. So there's no rewriting the Second Amendment.
Nope.
Or the 19th, which is my favorite, women's suffrage, or any of the others.
Yep.
Any of the others.
So not only would it be gavelled as non-germane to the subject matter, right, but the actual state legislature would be able to immediately recall that particular commissioner if they were to violate their rules in any manner. Not to mention that you would have to get a simple majority out of the convention for any proposed legislation anyway. So,
right. Okay, very good.
Or proposed amendment, I guess I should say.
Amendment.
Crafting 34 Ready legislation will be on the shoulders of the state legislature, but the art of staying nonpartisan will begin with the leadership of the bill's co-sponsors. This legislation won't unfold on its own. It will require bill sponsors who will follow through with the heart of the matter in order to have commissioners with well-crafted operating procedures. Convention of States action is here to educate Colorado now, so that there is a marked trail to follow when the time comes.
I think, a really good example is just two straightforward things like how many delegates.
Yep.
And we talked about that.
There will be great debate about that.
Right. How many delegates, but even more importantly, who gets to choose them, who gets to vet them and then choose them. I expect that in the state of Colorado, there's going to be a pretty fierce debate over that, because it's a matter of who is truly going to represent us. And then thirdly, we've talked about the eligibility requirements. We have a long list of recommended requirements, but I expect that we're going to have people wanting to argue about them. In particular, why can't a former congressperson be a commissioner?
Absolutely.
What's your thoughts on this, Frank?
But that debate is healthy. Okay, and the more of that conversation, the better off we are, because at some point in time, it's all about compromise. We're going to have to compromise. We're all going to have to come together and have this conversation. Left, right, independent. We need that vigorous debate, compromise, and actually settle on some outstanding legislation such that commissioner knows exactly what they're doing when they go to that proposal convention.
And I think a big part of striking the balance is having a very good understanding of what's really major and what's minor.
Exactly.
There are some things just it's not worth arguing about, and other things we better have the debate, because it's critical to the overall process.
And that's why the more that are in the conversation, the better.
All right, now for the fun part. This gets into, well, how does this work? How does this work? Well, one of the advantages we have in this whole process is it is what the legislature does every day for 4 months straight. They propose, debate, and vote on legislation.
Absolutely.
There's a highly prescribed process in the state of Colorado, as you would expect. Bills need to be proposed by legislators. They need to be proposed in a certain format and with certain due dates. And when they get to the crafting of the legislation, which becomes highly technical and legal in many cases, there are permanent staff here at the legislature, legal services, legislative services, who are assigned to the various representatives and committees. And their job is to make sure that legislation is written in language that meets requirements, standards, legal, state constitution, etc. And that's fairly straightforward. However, when you get into the actual legislation itself, I mentioned sponsor. You have to have a, so I'm going to have you talk about that because that's so critical.
Yeah, so it's fundamental that we find a bipartisan approach to this. We need a Republican and we need a Democrat co-sponsor, preferably, because this process is nonpartisan whatsoever. It's not partisan whatsoever. It's simply nonpartisan. This is just a law that talks about the structure on how a commissioner operates within their commission. So it sounds very straightforward, but it can be very complicated as well. So what we're looking for is we're looking for individuals to come together and actually craft legislation that will make Colorado ready for when we actually get to the 34 to actually have the convention.
Right.
It's not if, it's when it's going to happen.
When.
Colorado needs to be prepared to actually execute, because what will happen is once we get to 34 states, all 50 states can actually participate, and all 50 states need to be ready. That's really what this legislation is about.
Very good. And in spite of all of the process and legal and technical requirements, et cetera, and the ideal sponsorship being multi-partisan, bipartisan, but definitely nonpartisan, the reality is there are going to be very active political interests for and against this.
Yep.
And one of the things that we really have to ensure is the integrity of the content of the legislation.
Yes.
That it isn't amended in such a way that defeats the purpose. In particular, the focus on passing legislation that commissions these delegates to address only 3 things.
Yes.
Okay, and we mentioned those previously: term limits, fiscal responsibility, fiscal restraints, and also limiting the power and scope of the federal government.
But they're balanced.
We need to make sure that the integrity of that is preserved as this moves through proposal, committee hearings, and then first reading, second reading, third reading, and the debate associated with it.
Absolutely. But more importantly, it cannot be vague legislation.
That's a great point.
It's got to have some teeth in it, and it has to be laid out very methodically so that when we get to convention, we have a process.
Yes.
And the state of Colorado already knows what that process is, and they just execute at that point in time. It's very critical.
Great.